Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde, and we're going to talk about the effect of the woke and how somehow they have this incredible amount of influence despite having rather small numbers. The question is, how far should that influence extend? Well, there's a court case that was recently decided, and it turns out there are limits to how far the woke can inflict themselves on others. I've got details coming right up.
The press club are biased all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde, and twice a week I get a chance to sit down and go over some of the news stories or issues or policies that need just a little bit deeper dive. Today we're going to be talking about the Big City Coffee case, which has actually been going on for about 4 years. And I'll give you some of the details from the actual news stories, but in a nutshell, there was a coffee shop which was set up on the Boise State University campus. That apparently this coffee shop was showing solidarity with police. And this is back during 2020, which, as you recall, was a time where there was, shall we say, a pretty strong anti-police movement, defund the police, Black Lives Matter, etc., that was not of a supportive nature. Well, the administration at Boise State University apparently applied pressure and basically drove this shop off of campus. And that prompted a lawsuit from the shop owner in which she prevailed this past week. In fact, it was a unanimous jury decision. But let's go into some of the details here. We have reports here from the Idaho Dispatch as well as BoiseDev.com. Big City Coffee awarded millions in lawsuit against former BSU administrators. So here are a few of the particulars. Again, this is from the Idaho Dispatch. Big City Coffee's been awarded $3 million in damages after a jury returned a unanimous verdict against several former Boise State University administrators who acted in their personal capacity to target the company's owner. And also the jury awarded an additional $1 million in punitive damages from 9 of the 12 jurors. So Sarah Jo Fendley is the owner of Big City Coffee. She won her lawsuit against Alicia Esty and Leslie Webb. Now, Esty was the vice president for university affairs as well as chief of staff at BSU. Webb was the vice president of student affairs and enrollment management. And here's the backstory. Fendley's coffee shops had several locations, including a newer one on BSU's campus at the time. Fendley's thin blue line flag at her off-campus location became a target after the George Floyd riots and protests that swept the country in 2020. Fendley had the flag up in support of her fiance at the time, who was shot in the line of duty in 2016 as a Boise police officer. Now here, Boise Dev picks up on the reporting and tells us that after a 9-day jury trial, Fendley came out on top over Alicia Esty and also Boise State President Marlene Trump's former chief of staff and former vice president for student affairs, Leslie Webb, in her lawsuit, which alleged that the pair removed Fendley and her business over her support of law enforcement in the fall of 2020. So just in a nutshell, she was supportive of law enforcement at a time where the woke were not supportive of law enforcement. So what better thing to do than we must punish her. We must cancel her. This is part of that cancel culture, woke mob mentality. But in this case, it resulted in a lawsuit being filed. So Boise Dev goes on to report. The ruling is the latest in a case that started in 2021 when Big City Coffee filed a $10 million tort claim against the university and several administrators. Now, Fendley alleged that having to vacate her on-campus business following student upheaval in the wake of Minnesota resident George Floyd's death violated the Idaho Consumer Protection Act and her constitutional rights. Students had questioned the coffee shop's enthusiastic support of the thin blue line and police officers at its downtown location and called for the closure of its Albertsons Library location. So, okay, just so we're clear, the students weren't happy with the pro-police stance of this coffee shop. And when students are unhappy about something, what's the proper course of action? Do we just automatically do what they say? Well, apparently there were some administrators at Boise State that felt that was the case. Now, the decision came after 9 days of witness testimony and evidence over the course of 3 weeks with Esty, Webb, Associate Vice President for Campus Services Nicole Nimmons, BSU President Marlene Tromp, Also, Findley's former fiance and retired BPD Sergeant Kevin Holtree and others all took the stand for questioning from both sides. Now, the jury also reviewed evidence related to concerns from a group of students about the coffee shop and how university officials reacted, as well as 2 audio recordings of meetings between Findley and university officials. But this is where it gets interesting. It's the idea that those students were upset. And Findley's attorney, Michael Rowe, with the firm Gibbons Pursley, he was happy with the end result, praising the results in brief remarks on his way out of the building Friday night, saying, "We're very grateful. The system worked. We had a great jury. The clerk was great. Sarah got her day after all these years. We're very pleased." Keely Duke, on the other hand, was the attorney representing Webb and Estee from the firm Duke Evad, and sent a statement to the media vowing to appeal the case to the Idaho Supreme Court, saying, "We respectfully but strongly disagree with today's verdict and plan to appeal. We were honoring the First Amendment rights of all involved." But let's dig a little deeper into whose rights really were being observed. A major focus for the Big City Coffee owner's lawyer in his arguments was centered around meeting minutes for the Inclusive Excellence Student Council. That's an arm of student government. Now, these minutes showed that Webb's conversation with students airing their frustrations about Big City Coffee's affiliation with the Thin Blue Line in support of police. Now, Webb told the jury it was her job to hear those students out, even though they had no power to change the contract with Big City Coffee or make other administrative decisions. So that raises the question. So why was it then that the university decided, well, we better bow to those students and we better do what they say? Well, let's move on with the story. Rowe argued that Boise State was focused only on hearing and accommodating students' strong feelings instead of setting them straight on Findley's support of the Thin Blue Line. In other words, because it's a protected First Amendment activity, it's her opinion. And he says the point is they are kids. Although the defendants say don't call them kids, they're adults. But then on the other hand, they want special treatment. We're going to allow the kids to slander people and say horrible things about Findley's business. So it's one way or the other. They're either adults and they're fully accountable for the things they say and do, or they're really just children and we just ignore them. But he said, don't let the defendants have it both ways. Now, the defendants, apparently their attorney said that they're defending Big City and Miss Findley's First Amendment rights and no one else's. So she sees this as a zero-sum game. If Miss Findley's rights were being protected, then the students' rights to free speech weren't. Because her rights are above all others, all student rights and Boise State's rights. Just imagine if Alicia Estee and Leslie Webb had said yes to that. Imagine what a college campus would look like if they said yes. If Chick-fil-A says, we'd like you to do something about the gay and lesbian community, that's the world Big City and Sarah Findley want to live in. Now, that's a pretty good amount of hyperbole there, but oh my. If we allow the observation of Ms. Findley's First Amendment rights, or at least protect them and allow her to fly that thin blue line flag in support of law enforcement, somehow that is trampling the rights of the students who just want to, deny her freedom of speech. Funny how that works. It's kind of an interesting one-way street, and nowhere is it more clear to see that one-way street at work than on the campuses of our nation's colleges and universities. But in this case, the jury heard the facts. They very clearly came to the understanding that, yeah, what was done was wrong, and it was punitive, and it was unnecessary. Now, I appreciated Ron Nate's take on this. The ruling in favor of Findley was praised by Idaho Freedom Foundation President Ron Nate, who portrayed it as a warning to other institutions. Nate said in a statement, I'm thrilled at the outcome of this trial. This verdict is not only a big win for free speech and the First Amendment, but it's also a warning to other institutions that would use dirty tactics to promote a woke agenda and create a cancel culture on their campuses. A big thank you to Sarah Findley for standing up for what is right. This is one of just many victories that we will look forward to. So, I know that I hate to see things defined in just, well, somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. But in this case, I feel like it was probably the right thing. And yes, Boise State, or at least the former Boise State administrators, say they're going to appeal it and everything, but it needs to be spelled out. And sometimes a slap on the hand, in fact, a $3 million or $4 million slap on the hand needs to be administered to remind people that if you want to enjoy your own rights, you have got to be able to allow others to exercise theirs. Now, just because this coffee shop owner had a thin blue line flag celebrating and affirming support for law enforcement doesn't give, students, even very impassioned students who, know everything at that point, because they've been told they know everything at that point. It doesn't give them the right to deny her right to run a business and to hold her opinions. And it was so funny. I saw at least one tweet where it's like, wow, this is the free market at work here. Why isn't Boise State University allowed to exercise its freedom of speech? And it's like, it's a state-run institution. Sorry, but if you are a government-run institution, well, it's a little bit different than if it's a private business. And if BSU was a private business, well, I'd probably be singing a slightly different tune. But the fact is, they need to honor and they need to respect all those points of view, even the ones with which, some students may not respect. I know they make a lot of noise. So if we don't do something, they might get mad. Well, good. There was a time when universities were a place where people could actually go to encounter opinions different from their own. And maybe they adopt those opinions, maybe they don't, but at least they'd be exposed to them and would create a more well-rounded worldview. But instead, it's become this narrow-minded, single track where only people who agree with me are free to speak their minds. That doesn't bode well for free speech. So let's take the win where we can. Congratulations, hoist a cup of coffee for Big City Coffee. And let's remember, if you want to enjoy free speech and you want to exercise your rights, you've got to be willing to allow others to do likewise. It's only fair. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Press Club or bias all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.